In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your passenger side CV axle. This is the longer one, which has the carrier bearing on it. Let's get started. Remove all 5 of your lug bolts and then remove the wheel. In the center right here, you'll have a 13mm axle bolt. Remove it. Now you want to make sure your axle pushes through the hub. You don't want it to be seized in there. So put the bolt in a couple threads and just push it. If not, you can use a hammer on the end of the bolt. You always want to replace this bolt, so if it gets damaged, it doesn't really matter. This one moves freely, so that's fine. Moving further, I'm going to take the ABS wire off of the strut. Just like that, pull it off, and if you follow it, it's also clipped in over here, right by the brake line. And the reason I want to remove these is because once I pull the knuckle down, this will give me more slack on the wire, and it's not going to potentially break it. So there we go. Just leave that like this. I'm going to go ahead and unclip it from this little clip as well. All right, now we got plenty of slack in the ABS wire. Perfect. Now the 21mm socket, remove these 2 nuts that hold the strut onto the knuckle. Hold the bolt with a 19. I'm going to pull this top one out. There are some spring washers here. Save those. With this top one out, I'm going to move the knuckle around so I can free up the lower one. Tap the lower one out. Make sure you don't damage the threads. I'm going to use a punch on this side to drive the bolt out the rest of the way. Now you can separate the knuckle from the strut. Pull the strut back. Always be careful of wires and brake hoses. Push the knuckle. Push the axle through. You move this to the side like that. Well, I thought I'd have enough play in the knuckle, but I don't. So I'm going to remove the tie rod nut so that I can swing the knuckle forward even more. 18mm socket. This popped free. Sometimes they're stuck in here, in which case you can take a hammer and gently tap it out. And what this does is it allows me to do this with the knuckle. Now we can take the axle, wiggle it, pop it right out of the knuckle. There it is. You can set it aside. Make sure your ABS wire has slack on it still. Same with the brake hose. Everything's perfect. You can use a bungee cord if you want. I will, to tie up the knuckle like this. Next, we need to take this shield down. So I'm just going to go around, and my bolts are 12mm. Yours might be different. So it looks like someone replaced these. That's why mine might be different. So just go around, take off everything that holds on this shield. Now with the shield off, you can see these 2 12mm bolts here that hold the carrier bearing cap in place. I have to take this off and then break the carrier bearing free from the carrier bearing holder. So, like I said, 12mm socket, take these off. Guess I'll have to do this one by hand. All right, take that off. Okay, this breaks free. Slide it out towards the passenger side. Watch out for your seals inside the transmission. Move the strut aside if needed. There it is. Here's your passenger side CV axle. Now get your new axle, slide it through. Watch out for any wires, hoses, and of course your axle boots. As you approach the differential, slide it through. Be careful of your seal. You don't want that to get damaged. And line up the carrier bearing. Give it a couple twists so it can actually lock in to the splines. That feels like it locked in. It's got a little bit more to go. So I'm going to use a rubber mallet on the end of the axle and tap it through the rest of the way. That bottomed out. Clean up the mounting surface on the cap if needed. Same there, should have mentioned this prior. Slide the cap over. It goes in one direction. If you put it the wrong way, it's not going to fit. Put the bolts in. Okay, let's tighten these down. Make sure these are nice and snug. Okay, let's bring this shield back up and re-secure it. Next, before the axle goes in, I like to apply some anti-seize to the splines of the axle. That way it doesn't get seized up in the knuckle over time. You don't need a lot, just a thin coating all around will do the trick. Now grab your knuckle, move it over, put the axle through. Make sure you don't pinch the boot on the strut here. Line it up with the splines. You might have to spin the rotor a little bit, spin the whole hub so the splines can line up. Line the strut up with the knuckle. In my case, I have to push this down, make sure your ABS wire is safe. Let's put the strut bolts through. Remember, these bolts go front to back, so line this up, whichever hole lines up first. Send the bolt through. I put a little bit of anti-seize on the shank of the bolt. You can do that if you want. It's not necessary, but sometimes if you live in rusty conditions, that's a good idea. There we go. Send that one through. Do the same to the other one. Okay. While I'm dealing with these, might as well put the nuts on, as well as these little spring washers. They came on there, so they're on there for a reason. What they do is they hold tension on the nut, extra tension that is, prevent it from loosening up. Hold the bolt with a 19mm wrench, put your 21 socket on the nut. As you can see, this knuckle has a little bit of adjustment to it, so you want to make sure you push it in all the way when you tighten these up. You can let your alignment professional do the rest. You will need an alignment after this job. Once you tighten up the first one, you don't need to push the knuckle in anymore. It'll stay. Tighten up the second one. Now we can torque them. The torque for these two is 105 Newton meters, which converts to 77 foot-pounds, and then an additional 60 degrees. We'll start with the 77 foot-pounds, or 105 Newton meters. That's one. And two. Now let's do the 60 degrees. My torque wrench is able to read degrees. If not, you can just eyeball it. Hold the bolt. That's 60 degrees right there. And that's 60 on this one. Let's get the ABS wire mounted back where it belongs. Okay, time to put the tie rod back. There we go. Snug it up, then we'll torque it. The torque for this is 70 Newton meters, or 52 foot-pounds. Now let's install the axle bolt, bottom it out, then we'll torque it. The torque for this is 35 Newton meters and then 90 degrees. 35 Newton meters equals to about 26 foot-pounds, and 90 degrees is a quarter of a turn. I put a lug bolt in here. That's what's going to help me hold the whole hub assembly in place, otherwise it's just going to spin. So I'm going to put my pry bar through this, torque this to 35 Newton meters. And now we're going to go 90 degrees. My torque wrench reads degrees, but if yours doesn't, like I said, a quarter of a turn. That's it right there. And as always, you want to use a new bolt every time. Let's get the wheel back on. Start on all 5 of your lug bolts and then torque them to 100 foot-pounds. Torque these in a cross pattern. And double check them.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.